Welcome to the Restoring Christian Culture podcast. My name's Dan Sevigny, and I'm excited that you've joined us again today. We're going to talk about all things related to the most exciting topic for Catholics, and that is the new Pope. Today, I'm joined by my son, Matthias. Matthias, say hello.
Hello. It's good to be back.
We're excited that you're all here to join us. Last time that we were speaking with you, Matthias, we were talking a little bit about who was the possible Pope, and we were throwing around names, and I think that Leo XIV did not get a mention in our podcast.
Leo XIV was actually my pick. I thought the next Pope would be Leo XIV, but I did not think it would be Provost.
Okay.
Prevost. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's very interesting. So, we watched it together. We have a school here at Sanctus Ranch, Lumen Christi Academy. And so, as soon as there was the video of white smoke out there, we all rushed and you saw the kids. They were all released from class. I thought that was a decent idea. And we got in front of the television and got an opportunity to watch it. So tell me some of your reaction.
Well, I think my initial reaction was, well, one, in terms of the group that we were with and, being able to actually understand the Latin and knowing enough of the cardinals' names, I was just utterly dumbfounded when, the cardinal protodeacon said Prevost. I never would have thought I would have been Prevost, an American. That was what I kept saying. I kept saying, an American Pope, they've elected an American. I never thought in my lifetime I would ever see an American Pope. And so that was my first reaction. And then after that, it was all just the nerves, the excitement, who is this guy, exactly what is he going to do, that sort of thing. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it was that same shock. We just thought Americans were off the table. That's just not going to happen. And so, as they started to make the announcement, you heard it. And I remember just being like, what? I think there was some, for me, I would be honest with you. I think that there was some concern that it was going to be Parolin because it was so quick. We were estimating that it was the fourth vote. Turned out that it was the fourth vote. And so for them to get to that election so quick, it kind of led to maybe that's what's going to happen, but it turned out not to be. And so now that we have Leo XIV, there's some things that were pretty nice right off the get-go. And probably that starts right from when he walked out onto the loggia.
Yeah, I'd say for me, the first bit of excitement was just hearing Leo XIV. I had expected it, but I don't exactly know why I expected it, but it's good to get a papal name that is a pre-conciliar name, pre-Vatican II name that's being used again. It brings back some of the tradition. Pope Francis in his humility chose a novel name, humility. And so it was just good to get back to the traditions of the church, taking another pope's name. And it's particularly exciting because of, the great Pope Leo XIII, who had an incredible reign, and he did some pretty incredible things. And so usually when a newly elected pope takes a name, they're thinking about the predecessors of that name. And so if he ends up to be a pope in the vein of Leo XIII, that bodes very well.
Yeah, I think not only was it the name that was exciting, but then to just see him come out. They had been showing on some of the social media, they were showing the cry room. They call it the crying room?
Room of Tears.
Room of Tears. There you go. It's kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And basically they were showing all the possible vestments. And, it had been a long time since we saw the traditional garb of a pope. And when he walked out, it was interesting because I almost felt like it was maybe a movie. Like I've never seen that guy as pope before, but he looks like he could be the pope.
It is. Yeah. It's a weird shock to see somebody else be the pope, even though, somebody new is going to walk through, under those curtains. But yeah, I would say he definitely looked like a pope. Yeah.
Well, and I think some of the things that, people are talking about now, they're talking about, hey, how does this pope rank and what's he going to do? And everybody wanted to figure out who is the pope and how's he going to act about absolutely everything within the first 24 hours. We see the news media doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh, he's not as humble as Francis was because he moved back into the apostolic palace and all of these other things that are just kind of ludicrous at this point. But I think, our discussions, as we've been talking about it throughout the weekend, I think we've both gotten to the same place. You've been encouraging in the sense that, our job as Catholics is to pray for this new Pope, to pray for him that God may use him and bestow all the graces that are possible on him in his office, and so that he can lead all of us as Catholics to a deeper love of the faith, to living out our faith. And I think in the midst of this very polarized world we're in right now, that's hard to remember. And it may be hard to remember too, from the standpoint that, let's be honest, it's been very challenging the last, 12, 13 years.
Yeah, definitely. And people immediately jump to conclusions. Oh, this guy was created a cardinal by Pope Francis. He says he's going to be sort of in the line of Pope Francis, things like that. And, they're not unreasonable, concerns, but you have to give time. You should give time to anybody in terms of judging them or evaluating their decisions, because that's just a part of prudence. That's a part of the virtue of prudence. And especially with the Pope, it's been 4 days, 4
Right.
days. Yeah,
Right.
4 days. In a pontificate, which is probably going to last 20, 25 years, maybe even. I mean, that's one of the things you said. So it's like, how can you already be to one side or the other, one of the extremes after, 4 days? I know you said something a little
Absolutely.
bit like that.
I think that's one of the things that I'm excited about. I'm hopeful that for you guys, for my children, and for the young people that are out there, we could get back to the point where there was a pope that we were just happy to see, like, what did he do? But also maybe a pope that's not always making news. Maybe he's just being the Pope. That would be very good. And if he's got a 15, a 20, a 25-year reign, that can be an awful long time. So there's no rush to do anything. The other comment that I would just say that has been interesting to see is that some people have said, well, he said this or he said that. And I don't know about you. Certainly, I know a lot about you,
Yeah.
but I can speak for myself. 4 years ago, I did not have the same understanding that I have today. I would say the core beliefs were all there, but the practice, the application, that was certainly different for me than it is today. So even if, the Pope in previous time had said this or that, everything's different today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there is, there's a new Pope. Who knows how it's going to go? His way of governing, it takes a long time to measure something like that. He's, you even mentioned moving back into the Apostolic Palace. He hasn't even done that yet. He just opened the doors to the papal apartments today. He doesn't move in for like another 7 weeks or something like that. And so it's like, you just have to give it time. And hopefully, like you said, we have a little bit more of a quieter papacy. And like you said, waking up and being like, well, what has the Pope done today? And not, what has the Pope done today? As
Absolutely.
we tended to do under the last pontificate. So hopefully we have something like that. Or maybe we could just be like Catholics of the previous 20 centuries and woken up and not thought about the Pope every day. And I mean that in a pure way. And like,
Right.
we're focusing more on ourselves, on our own personal holiness and things like that. So I definitely think we're probably headed for something like that.
Yes.
A papacy like that.
I think, let's spend a little time on the American part of it. It's very interesting. There have been some posts out there, video of him. I guess it was a playoff game, baseball.
Yeah, it was World Series, yeah.
Was it the World Series? And, our Pope went to the World Series.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that are like, actually, I grew up next to Bob or Rob. I've heard both. And, that's crazy to think that a Pope here, in the United States is, now
Yeah.
a man is a Pope.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. The papacy has gotten a whole lot more local. You never think about, did the Pope grow up a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan or whatever? And it's crazy to see it this local, and I never would have expected it. But, it also reveals something deeper about the papacy, which is the Pope is just a man. He grew up much, at least in like a physical sense, the same way we did. He's just as normal as us in that way. And like a Pope that just grew up in Chicago. Now we have an American Pope. And you think about that for a second and you just say, wow, a son of our shores has risen to the see of St. Peter. You know, it's crazy to think, even because the church in the United States is so young and we've already gotten a pope. We were missionary territory until 1908. We are a very young church, technically speaking, in terms of local church. So the fact that one of our own has risen already to the highest, to being the vicar of Jesus Christ on earth, that's pretty impressive. You also have to think about, what does this mean? Why would they choose an American when there's such a stigma against us? We are, the current world power. Usually a pope isn't chosen from a country that's a current world power. And so you have to think about what is trying to be accomplished here, or maybe even some mitigating factors like the fact that he worked in South America, things like that. But what are they trying to accomplish here? And so that remains to be seen, but that will certainly be interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. There's a lot of politics that are going on, and hopefully the Pope will remain largely out of those politics, except for the things that are important on faith and morals. And but it's very interesting now that a young church of the Americas would have a pope, and that he also, though, is a pope that's had a lot of experience. South America. He spent some time in the Vatican. So it's interesting now to have a pope that's very comfortable speaking Latin, seems to be very comfortable with Italian, with Spanish, and then to hear a pope speaking English, that's pretty neat. Yeah. So I think that puts him in a great position to really be able to communicate with an awful lot of folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, the language aspect is a big part of it. I've read some different reports that are saying that too. Like, it's very useful to have a pope that speaks a lot of languages. Like, for better or for worse, despite the rest of the other parts of his papacy, John Paul II was a Renaissance man in a lot of ways. I mean, with the amount of languages he spoke. And so you're able to reach out more. From what I've seen, Pope Leo speaks English, Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, and he can read and write Latin and German. So that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. And that's something we need too. That was probably like one of those mitigating factors that I talked about, because, he's an American who has so much outside experience, external experience from the United States. That's probably something that made him more agreeable to the other cardinals of the world, especially to the Europeans or things like that. So that was probably one of those factors. But it's good to have a pope who really, he can have an easier time navigating the political world. Part of the, one of the challenges of Pope Francis's pontificate is he didn't speak English particularly well. And that's very difficult when English has become the sort of lingua franca, literally meaning like French language, the language of diplomacy. And so it's very helpful that you have a pope that can do that. And I'm very excited to see where this goes. Hearing, a pope with somewhat of a slight Midwestern accent speak in the Sistine Chapel is, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to know more about, and quite frankly, I don't know too much, maybe you can shed some light on it. Is there anything about his religious life as an Augustinian that would give us some indication of how he thinks, how he views certain things in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say my personal experience of the Augustinians is very limited. Is yours the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that I've actually ever met an Augustinian friar. Have you?
I have not.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it doesn't seem that they're super big in the United States, so I just haven't come across them. But one thing it does tell you is that, he did say when he was speaking from the loggia that he is a son of St. Francis, or not St. Francis, St. Augustine. So that's a good thing. St. Augustine is one of the great Latin doctors of the church, and his wisdom is immeasurable. And so having a pope that loves St. Augustine and knows his works probably by heart is very good. You even saw some Augustinian symbols on his coat of arms. And so you can tell that the Augustinian life will very much be a part of his papacy, and especially the learning that goes along with that. I think it's also slightly reassuring that he's an Augustinian. They're much more humble, originally sort of a hermetical lifestyle, but they're not as involved with a lot of the silliness which we've seen from the religious recently, like, the Jesuits or even the Dominicans or even the Franciscans. They've always been small, a smaller religious order. So it's interesting to see what that impact will be. I think it's much more of an intellectual impact. Okay, so he's very, very well learned. Definitely has a good liturgical lifestyle. The Augustinians are known for that. And their charism is one of intense love, but great intellectual prowess. Maybe not as much as, say, the Jesuits, but I mean, one could make an argument that didn't show much in the last pontificate. So,
and then my understanding is he's also a canon lawyer.
Yeah, I did see that he is a canon lawyer, or at least that he has some sort of degree, I think from the Angelicum. I think it was the Angelicum, that he has a degree in canon law from. So that would be very helpful. I wrote about this in one of my recent articles. The canon law, or the legal situation in Vatican City right now in Rome is incredibly tumultuous simply because of the last pontificate. They just said things or made things without actually legislating. And so that needs to be cleaned up, and hopefully he's the one to do that, or at least to advise how to do that.
Yeah.
So hopefully we see that. Yeah.
Well, so, we're still in kind of the shadow, if you would, of the conclave. So there's some of that information that's also interesting. And it may be that, as an American, we're getting our information from other Americans, but it seems like Cardinal Dolan and then Cardinal Burke, both seem to be on board, and they were moving that forward. And so that's kind of interesting. Any thoughts on any of the, we don't know anything because obviously it'd be a mortal sin. They'd be excommunicated, actually, if they were to reveal anything from the conclave.
Yeah, I mean, it's very fuzzy what actually counts as revealing and what doesn't. To what extent can they reveal things? And the Pope has some factor to play in that too, because technically he can dispense with certain things and he can show some certain things should he want to. He usually doesn't. But it seems as though Cardinal Prevost, at least going into that conclave, did not expect himself to be elected Pope. And it seems as though he wasn't probably a compromise candidate per se, because you don't usually get a compromise by the fourth scrutiny.
Right.
Scrutiny being ballot. So that doesn't make tons of sense. So chances are that he probably was actually highly valued by some cardinals going in. Probably, it seems as though I've seen some different reports, some insider things, like it could have been cardinals like Dolan and Burke, and maybe a couple of South American ones. It seems as though the Africans were probably much more favorable to a cardinal like Prevost as compared to a Parolin. And so, yeah, you can imagine he is the more moderate of all options, but I've been pleasantly surprised in the sort of overwhelming consensus of both sides of the church's sort of political spectrum, if you will, being sort of both okay with this choice, and especially a person like Cardinal Burke, who probably had a significant role.
Yeah. No, it is exciting. Now, let's be honest. So, we don't know. We don't know how he will govern. We don't know what will be next. We don't know what he'll do with, some of the things that were just kind of radical that Francis brought to us. We don't know how much of the Francis papacy will just fade away. Yeah. God willing, as just it. Okay. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. So he could go to a very liberal extreme. He could go the other way. But I think that one of the things that I've been seeing an awful lot of folks, people that I watch, that I value, friends of the ranch. These are the top commentators. And there seems to be this cautious optimism that's there. And I think that that's positive for all of us.
Yeah, I definitely think it is. I am very optimistic at the moment. Simply because it seems as though he is more or less just concerned with teaching the faith, and not, it doesn't seem as though he's a super political, minded, statesman. So hopefully things continue that way. But I think there are a lot of cardinals, and especially the now Pope, who just want the sort of chaos of the last pontificate to go away. The fact that, we have to be pitted against each other, and we have to go after this certain part of the church and just root them out. I think a lot of that sort of reign of terror is over, and I think we can sort of start to relax, to take a breath in, and to just not, sort of as you were saying, to just like let it be quieter, and
Right.
Maybe we don't have to just have this constant, sort of attacking coming at us from Rome and just at each other,
Right. Right. And hopefully that'll make its way down to the local diocese level, where things will kind of calm down. One of the other things that was pretty interesting, as a traditionalist, new, but as a traditional Catholic and attending the traditional Latin Mass, and as we are looking to restore that Christian culture, how amazing. There was a traditional Latin Mass that was in St. Mary Major.
Yeah.
And then again, I think today or yesterday in St. Paul's outside the wall.
Yeah, I saw that too.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and who knows, that probably would have happened anyways. That could have been previously scheduled, even if we were still living under, the reign of Pope Francis. But it's just good to see. It seems like there's not like this hold your breath, what's going to happen now.
Right.
And so it seems like more at home, like things are normal again.
Yes.
There's even under Pope Benedict, there would have been no sort of, they said traditional Latin Mass inside Mary Major, inside of Paul outside the walls. It's just, it feels different. It feels like, okay, maybe people aren't coming after us for this one.
Right. Right. Well, here's one of the things that I'd love to toss back. I'd love to get your opinion. You've probably been talking to other students in the school, other friends. You're 18. This is going to probably be a pope till you're possibly close to my age.
Yeah, probably.
And so for a young Catholic that, you're on fire for the faith, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to your friends? What are you hearing?
I think there's a lot of optimism, particularly about the church in the United States. We really just need a pope that allows the faith to grow, that isn't saying just crazy stuff from St. Peter's every Sunday. And so I think there's a lot of optimism that Pope Leo is that type of pope, and sort of just someone to back up the teaching of the church and support us as we go forward. Because, when we're talking about 20 years, we're talking about the formation of like an entire generation of priests, an entire generation of any sort of vocation. And so I think there's a lot of optimism because, the truth is there. The truth of the church is there. And so that will always convert people, that will always attract people. And, the younger generation, especially in the United States, which is coming back to tradition, it just needs breathing room, and then it can go. I think in terms of having an American pope could be extremely, extremely helpful in the conversion of our country, make America Catholic.
Amen.
And I think that's very doable. I think there are sort of in this honeymoon period of a papacy, when it's, new pontificate has just started, it allows people to come back to the faith who maybe haven't been there in a long time. And I think it also allows a lot of Protestants to get over the usual stigma that, Catholicism is an outsider's religion. Catholics have always been identified with, traditional ethnic groups or, backgrounds like the French, the Irish, the Italians make up the majority of it. And so I think it opens it up, having an American pope, to where really a lot of America could be converted.
Amen.
And I think there's a lot of optimism around that.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that, whether it be someone, that's older, that, let's be honest, the earlier I thought you were going to say the reign of terror. The last pontificate was just so hard. There were so many challenges, let alone what happened in the world and all kinds of other things. But I know that there's people that have left the church. They've just said, "Hey, I'm gonna stay at home." There's young people that are like, "That seems nuts."
Yeah.
On both sides of the crazy political spectrum. But what do you say to those people that are like, "Hey, I haven't been there. I've left. What's step one if you're like, wow, this week was cool. Look at the Catholic Church. Like maybe there's something there." What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think you just got to keep up on that. A lot of it is out of our hands. Like, for better or for worse, we just need Rome. We need Rome to act like Rome again. That way we can, the whole church can continue to grow and to branch out and to expand. And, what you're mentioning, that'll happen naturally, I think. And I think when people see the faith being practiced as it should in a way that's attractive, they come back naturally to that. And I think that can happen. I think that will happen. I'm very optimistic about that. So I think, it's day 5 or something like that. So just if we give it a little bit more time, I'm very optimistic about what the results could be.
Yeah. And I will say for someone that now, I can't believe it, has had knowledge of now 4 popes. There was possibly 6, when I was born. And so, but I don't remember the early ones, to see different men as successors of Peter, some of the real big challenges, some of the things that were inspirational, whether we like it or not, the Pope has a big impact. And today in our world of media, he seems to be, someone that's going to look at what's going on with artificial intelligence and other things like that. And, that media is going to be there. There's going to be information constantly coming out. Just a Pope that just prays.
Yeah.
A Pope that was willing today. It was great. He did the media reception and he blessed everyone.
Yeah.
And, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you see the Pope give a blessing and you see people fall and genuflect as they should. It's one of the things we've been talking about here with what we do at the ranch and what we do in the school is how do we continue to restore that Christian culture, what used to be there, that honor, that dignity. The Pope has a lot to do with that. And so hopefully what we will have is we'll have a situation where the Pope will continue to maintain that awe, that ability to just bring us back to the faith so that we can live it out in our everyday lives. And then, as we look at that, maybe it'll really inspire, because we know a lot of young priests that it's been really hard on them, even the guys that are still in the fight, let alone the guys that have been canceled for craziness. It's been hard on the priests too. So this has got to be a shot in the arm for the priests and those in seminary.
Hopefully, yeah. And I think that's what I was saying is like those good priests, they just need breathing room. There's been this sort of top-down change in ideology for the last 12 years, and they just need breathing room because I think it's the natural course of events. So yeah, I think they definitely just need breathing room. And in terms of, restoring Christian culture, if just to offer some sort of concluding thoughts, it's very exciting to see a Leo XIV. Why? Well, Leo XIII was a great pope who wrote a very famous and historic encyclical called Rerum Novarum on capital and labor. And, Pope Leo XIV mentioned that he chose his name in large part due to this encyclical, and in which Pope Leo XIII sort of defends the rights of workers and of labor, and he sets them in the correct Christian context at the sort of dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And, in this encyclical, Leo XIII is talking about, okay, employers have to treat, their laborers correctly. There has to be this, this, and this. But he keeps coming back to this point where he says, but all of this will sort of be, it sort of won't matter if there's no return to Christian morality. If the Christian principles don't return, it doesn't really matter if, laborers are getting treated correctly. All of this has to happen inside of a Christian context. And so hopefully we'll see another great encyclical like that, which allows us, to truly, it puts in perspective our mission here, right? Restoring Christian culture. And hopefully we get something like that to come so we can continue to restore Christian culture.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. It's been fun. It's an exciting time. Let's be honest, it's been exciting, I think, for everyone in the entire world. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like, subscribe on whichever platform you're using. If you'd like to know more about what's going on right now at the ranch with the school, you can check out on Substack. We now have a new Restoring Christian Culture initiative. If you look that up under my name, you'll be able to get some information on what's going on in the ranch. And then you also have started a Substack, which is pretty awesome.
Yep. Ever Ancient, Ever New by Matthias Sevigny. So please look it up. Give me a read.
Awesome. Well, God bless you all. We'll look forward to catching you guys the next time on the Restoring Christian Culture podcast.